We're now joined by Elie Honig, Senior Analyst at CNN, Senior Legal Analyst and former State and Federal Prosecutor. Elie, let me ask you this. The hearings, the January 6 hearings will continue for months and months. We're not sure how they're going to play out, who's watching, what it means to different people. My question to you is, what do you believe the longer-term implications are for the judicial system and the electoral system?
Well, look, there are lessons here that we need to learn. And, you know, there's been a sort of tendency to analyze this like media criticism, like TV criticism. Is it interesting? Is it fun?
Like, is it a good show?
Right. Is it a good show? What are the ratings? Are people watching? Not to be callous about that because it matters, but I also don't care because it's so important that this story be told. And by the way, it is being watched, and you can see that people are responding to it. And for the tens of millions of people who watch, it gets amplified. We need to know what happened for our political system, because this is really not just sort of a matter of degree separate from anything we've seen before, but it's a matter of kind separate from what we see before. The judicial system has lessons to learn here. I think, by the way, the judicial system really stood up strong through this whole thing.
Explain that to folks. How many courts rejected the Trump legal argument to overturn the election in one state or another? How many?
Over 60 courts rejected this. State
and what
courts,
did the United States, I'm sorry, and then I'm going to ask you what the United States Supreme Court, which is dominated by either Trump appointees or conservative Republicans, they did something as well. The 60-plus courts did what, Elie?
They rejected Donald Trump's lawsuits either on the basis that they have no evidence, that tends to hamstring cases in court, or that they didn't have standing, meaning they didn't even state a claim that the courts recognized. And Steve, I think it's so important. We saw over 6 courts across this country, federal courts, state courts, judges who were elected, judges who were appointed, judges who were appointed by Democrats, judges who were appointed by Republicans, including Donald Trump, rejected these cases. And thank goodness they did. And I also want to note a couple other institutions that stood strong. The U.S. Department of Justice. I was very critical, not just of Bill Barr in my book, but of his underlings, Jeffrey Rosen, Richard Donahue. These are the people who refused to let Donald Trump weaponize DOJ and refused to let DOJ be signed on to this fraud that they had found, election fraud, when in fact they had found none. I think our state level election systems stood really strong here. You know,
attorneys general, secretaries of state, election officials, including in Republican dominated states like Georgia. And we heard the phone call between the president. Help me on this again.
Yeah, it was between the president and Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia.
Did the president ask him to, quote, find, and I don't want to put this is, I don't want to be unfair. Did he say, can you find X number of votes?
He said, I think I have the exact quote memorized. I've heard it and recited it so many times. I need you to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we need. Look, credit to Republican state and local officials across this country, because when Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman decided we're going to pick out these 7 states, 7 swing states that Joe Biden had won, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. And what they started doing was calling Republican state legislative leaders and state secretaries of state. And their assumption, Steve, was, hey, we're Republicans. You guys are Republicans. Do us a solid. Throw us your state. And across the country, the state speaker in Arizona, the speaker of the House in Pennsylvania, elsewhere, said, no, we're not going to violate our oath. We're not going to violate the Constitution.
Republicans,
yes, absolutely. And credit to them.
Then how does it square? How does it square that these Republican officials in the DOJ, Department of Justice, at the state level, a whole range of Republicans, and Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, and the Attorney General Bill Barr at the time, that they stood up and said, no, Mr. President, you did not win. We will not participate in this. But 70, maybe 80%, according to many polls, of Republicans believe, you're shaking your head, that Joe Biden is not the legally elected president of the United States.
I'm shaking my head because it's a great question, and I hadn't thought about that, and I can't reconcile it because we saw Republican elected officials from the county level up to the vice president who basically decided the corruption of this effort to steal the election, for me, for Republicans, I'm not saying I'm a Republican or Democrat, but I'm saying for them, transcended partisan politics. Yet you're right. There is this alarming number of Republican voters who have no problem with what happened, or don't see January 6th, or don't think Joe Biden was legitimately elected. It's a fascinating point. I can't reconcile it. I was sort of nodding at the remarkable nature of that observation.
Final question for those who say, Adubato, you're just part of the left-leaning media, and you got this Elie Honig on. Maybe he's from New Jersey, but he's part of CNN. They're left as well. You're just piling on the former president. It's just part of the fake news that media that the president and many former president and many talk about. Is that what we just did, Elie Honig? Is that what we just did?
I fully reject that. I don't do politics. I've worked I worked 8 years at DOJ. It just so happened I went in under the George W. Bush administration. I came out under the Barack Obama administration, 4 and 4. I worked under the Chris Christie administration. I worked under the Phil Murphy administration. I don't do politics. I don't care about politics. I care about law. I care about rule of law. And I'm sure you're the same, Steve.
And anyone who watches us on any regular basis knows I say it all the time. You can believe it or not. We have absolutely categorically no horse in this race. The only horse we do have is protecting our system of representative democracy. That's why it's called democracy at a crossroads. Elie, cannot thank you enough. Wish you all the best as you continue to work to try to share important legal perspectives on incredibly important matters that affect our state, our nation, and the world. Thank you, Elie.
Thanks, Steve. Always appreciate it.
You got to stay with us. We'll be right back.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by New Jersey Sharing Network, Investors Bank, Summit Health, MD Advantage Insurance Company, NJM Insurance Group, Englewood Health, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, and by the Adler Aphasia Center. Promotional support provided by Insider NJ and by bestofnj.com.
It only gets better when we stand together to tough through and get by. Even though it's harder than ever, we're gonna make it. Long as we don't break it, just do right. There's no sides. We must know it's part of forever. It only gets better.